brevity of introductions, since we are pressed for time. Lee, what do you think?
I think it would be a good idea to just read the names of the people that are in the room.
Okay. Let me get my participants list. So we have 24 participants, myself, and then, and please excuse me if I pronounce your name wrong. I'll try my best. We have Zanaya Kelly, Catherine Riedel, Christina McVie, Christina Paulsgrove, Dustin Fitzpatrick, Evan Canfield, Hannah Odin, Howard Myers, JB Shaw, Jamie Christine Irby, Jeanette Dren, Jeff Hildebrand, Kimberly Baeza, Lee Comrie, Luke Cole of the Sonoran Institute, Mead Meyer Wellborn, Melanie Alvarez, Nancy Neski, Natalie Shep, Paul Castorano, Paul Bloomer, and Roxanne Lindsley. I think that's all I have for participants. It's 24. All right. And then this is just to move on to the in-kind form, just to remind especially presenters and any participants to confirm the estimated amount of time you spent. We do, we collect it so that we can apply for matching funds for grants and other federal dollars. So if you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know, but just confirm with Lee Comrie or one of the PAG representatives about how much time you spent on the meeting. And then third, we're going to move to the approval of our October 1st, 2021 EPAC meeting summary. So if you have comments on this, please let me know now, or let Lee know if we have any comments on that October 1st meeting summary that was sent out. Christina McVie has her hand raised. I don't know how to call on her.
I would move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Christina. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Natalie, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. With hearing no comments, I believe we could just approve the minutes by consensus. If anybody wants to unmute, if you aren't in approval, let us know, but otherwise we'll approve by consensus since we are on Zoom. You can unmute your mic if you have any comments. So seeing none, we will move, take action and approve the meeting minutes by consensus. So our next item is nominations and election for the EPAC chair and vice chair. So according to the EPAC bylaws, the committee chair and vice chair term of office shall be for 2 years. PAC staff will introduce, that'll be me, the nominees. I'll introduce the nominees to fill the positions. And then we would vote for, do a vote of endorsement for the nominees. So we have 2 nominees. We have for chair, our candidate for chair is Natalie Shep. Natalie is a senior program manager for outreach and education at Pima County Department of Environmental Quality, where she administers programs that support sustainable action throughout Pima County, including the Clean Air Program. Natalie works with community partners, local jurisdictions, schools, and the University of Arizona to develop strategies and messages to encourage environmental sustainability. Natalie also serves as PDEQ's Environmental Justice Coordinator and on the board of directors for the Community Gardens of Tucson. She received a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and a Master's in Public Health from the University of Arizona. Natalie was also recently selected by Arizona Forward as an emerging sustainability leader. And then for vice chair, the candidate for vice chair is Kim Franklin. Let's see, Kim. Kim, are you on the call?
Kim is unable to join us today. She had a
okay.
conflict. Sorry, I forgot
was
to
like,
tell
what
you.
Okay.
My bad.
So the candidate for vice chair is Kim Franklin. She manages the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum science staff, a small collaborative conservation science team. Kim also runs the Sonoran Desert Cooperative Weed Management Area, which brings together a wide range of stakeholders from all levels of government, the private sector, and nonprofit organizations to tackle pressing invasive species challenges by fostering collaboration and coordination among community members, scientists, land managers, conservationists, and other professionals. Kim received her PhD from the University of Arizona, studying the environmental impacts of land cover change and buffel grass in Sonora, Mexico. Her research interests range widely from phenology of desert flora and fauna to environmental policy to remote sensing tools for mapping land cover change. So we would need a motion to approve the committee chair and vice chair for their 2-year terms. Is there any discussion or questions? Christina McBee has her hand raised again.
I would move to approve. That's a great slate. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Do we have a second?
I second. This is Kimberly Bias.
Thank you, Kimberly. So all in favor, if you'll just want to unmute your mics, or if you have any comments, you could unmute your mics and say all in favor.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, motion carries. We will have a new chair, Natalie Shep, and vice chair Kim Franklin for the next 2 years.
Congratulations.
I just wanted to interrupt quickly and thank Sarah for her years of service, both as vice chair and chair on this committee. She's done a formidable job, and we appreciate all the time that you spent leading these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. So we're going to move on to item number 5, which Lee is actually going to discuss with us. Lee Comrie with PAG is going to present the current draft of EPAC's top environmental issues list for 2022, and that'll guide topics to be addressed in the upcoming year and identify opportunities to coordinate. So Lee, I'll hand it over to you. I think you're muted still.
Lee, hold on. I have to unmute you because you've got my computer. Hold on. Okay, go ahead. Can you unmute?
There she goes.
All right. Okay, we're good to go. All right, so the top environmental issues list for 2022. This list, as you all know, is developed annually and used as a basis to engage on key topics that are relevant to the region and can facilitate discussion and raise awareness of these issues as we move through the year. So a preliminary draft of the issues list was sent to EPAC and its subcommittee members in early November. And we did receive feedback and edited the draft. And what you have in front of you is the version that has been edited based on your feedback. So we say thank you to those of you that did provide feedback. We always appreciate having some input as we work to develop this list. And just as a reminder, this is an action item to forward it on to PAG's executive director. So I'm going to briefly summarize a few of the changes from last year, as well as a couple of the changes from the most recent version that is now changed from the early November version. So firstly, we added this overview section. Then we have healthy environment and its subcategories, which have remained the same in broadly. And then what we did was we moved the smart region collaboration under regional resiliency for this 2022 list compared to the 2021. So the overview section was updated to reflect feedback that we received. It now mentions cross-sector coordination, noting that there's no one issue that's independent, there's overlap between the issues. And it also calls out the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion principles in planning practices. Under the clean air section, we now specify tracking the Arizona State Implementation Plan actions for the Rito PM10 non-attainment area and regional haze. And we emphasize regional coordination to increase transportation electrification that can improve air quality. The clean water section now calls out regional collaboration since water quality issues cross watersheds and aquifers. We reference broadband infrastructure in the resilient infrastructure section. The resilient economy section now references innovative public-private partnerships. And under the water reliability section, we added a sentence to emphasize regional collaboration between its many partners in water supply, conveyance, and quality. And we also acknowledge the imminent Colorado River Tier 1 shortage that will happen next year. The climate variability section was updated to reflect the completion of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and language was added to recommend specific goals to reduce emissions from mobile and stationary sources, as well as addressing the interconnected issues of extreme heat, wildfires, and flooding. So just as a reminder, this is an action item to send it on to the executive director. So typically that list is then shared as an information item with PAG's management committee and regional council. So with that, is there any feedback or comments from any of you?
Natalie has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I appreciate the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion were included in the overview section. But I put together a statement. I would like diversity, equity, and inclusion to be called out as its own priority. And I put together my own thoughts on what it should say. Is that something that I've sent it on to PAG? Is that something that you could pull up, Lee, or?
Give me a second.
Natalie, if you have it, I can give you the option to share if you'd like. Lee, does that work for you?
It does.
Okay, give me just 1 second. Let me take control back. Okay, go ahead and try now.
Oops, it's the wrong screen. Give me a second again here. I'm never very good at sharing.
You can see it though. Right.
Can you see? Is that what you can see?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I
can
can
see
see two pages,
your
but-
Word document.
Okay, good. What I was seeing was my email, so sorry about that. So
You might want to change the view to one page and then increase the size, because otherwise some folks with smaller screens, you just go to view up on the
Right.
top, and then there's towards the middle, it'll say one page next to the Zoom.
right. Okay, now it's really small.
And then you can make it bigger on the bottom right-hand corner with your Zoom feature there.
There we go. So this
That's
bolded
better.
this bolded statement was what I put together here. And this was the statement. So we've got diversity, equity, inclusion, and this is what was in the overview section. Mine is the bolded section. So Greater emphasis will be placed on ensuring that underserved and environmentally stressed communities are prioritized in order to improve their environmental conditions and ultimately the health of individuals who have historically suffered disproportionately from environmental degradation. Efforts to address inequities will include engaging underserved communities in transportation and environmental planning efforts from the beginning planning stages, listening closely to how they are being impacted by local environmental degradation, and prioritizing improvements within these communities based on the residents' lived experiences.
Okay, so do we have any other thoughts or feedback on Natalie's suggestion? Christina?
This is Howard Myers. I represent Saba. Can I make a comment about this paragraph, please?
Please.
Can you hear me okay?
We can,
May I make a comment?
absolutely.
Okay, I'm very concerned with the words in this paragraph. And therefore, while I'm not going to state on behalf of Saba that this paragraph needs to be deleted, I'm very concerned that this paragraph is added at this stage. There are some key words in here that will make a significant difference to many, many lives, and not just whomever the underserved communities are. And therefore, as a representative of Saba, I would very much like you to consider, before you approve the words in this, that there be one or more representatives of Saba to be included in a subcommittee that addresses this paragraph as we move forward, as PAG moves forward.
May I ask something? Natalie, could you increase the Zoom, like, so that it fills with, okay, thank you. My eyes are very poor. And then Howard, for clarification, you said people would be concerned. Could you help me understand? Are you saying the people who are getting disproportionate environmental impact would be concerned, or like it's hard for me to understand the harm that someone would be looking for, and I'd like it to be as clear as possible.
Well, again, my concern here today with the words in this paragraph, a few of them, it sounds like from this paragraph, if I understand those words correctly, that a special group, greater emphasis will be placed upon a special group of people as defined by whom? This committee or others? And I think that that is very worrisome. If I personally, who is part of this community for many, many years, is not defined as part of that special group, quote unquote, by me. That's my words, not anybody else's. I'm very concerned with these words, and therefore I would really like, I wish I would have had an opportunity. Was this paragraph just now added, I believe? Is that true?
That's correct. That's Natalie's suggestion. This we did receive this text from her, and we received feedback from others. And what you saw in the version that was distributed for this meeting, these specific words were not included. We kind of summarized, and the paragraph above it, you can see we make reference to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and meaningful engagement of underserved and environmentally stressed communities. So that was in the version that was sent out as part of the packet. The specific text that Natalie has inserted here is what she shared with us as her suggestions for inclusion in the issues list. So we take feedback from various parties and put it together in what you see in front of you. Natalie is requesting that her original text that she provided be inserted, and that the header be changed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's the committee's list. So, so Natalie, I don't know if you want to respond specifically, or Sarah, if you have a particular way you want to take this.
If
Yeah,
I may,
so-
if I may interrupt one more time, here's some, whom determines, quote, the communities are prioritized, which communities, and whom determines, quote, who have historically suffered disproportionately. Whom determines the definition, or whom determines that? That is huge in our society today, tomorrow, in the future. That's the biggest concern I have with this paragraph, is the decision makers. I'm one of them, or am I? I don't know. And I think that we might very well be cutting out a huge segment, not concerning a huge segment in our society with these words, when somebody decides who have historically suffered disproportionately. We all have, in my opinion. Go ahead.
My thought was that, and if we can just kind of look at the first two words, that greater emphasis would be placed on it, and the people that would decide that would be the members of the EPAC committee. So when we're looking at the issues, the priority issues that we're addressing, the environmental issues, we historically have, there are, Tucson is a perfect example of, we've got a large number of people that consider themselves underserved and not represented, that they are being disproportionately impacted by environmental degradation. And I believe that this committee and the members of it should be putting greater emphasis on those communities in the work that we do.
I could add to that. In our watershed planning program, as an example, we have a requirement to comply with Title VI and environmental justice regulations. And so we follow the EPA's guidance on that. And one thing this paragraph doesn't state, but I feel like might be implied, is that analysis exists, and we could present the analysis to the committee as well, as a future presentation. So it's that's one more aspect of addressing inequities, is to look at it geographically and other means. And the concept is that you're not only featuring underserved communities, you're making sure that they are equally served. So it's not exclusive. It means take anyone who's not included and make sure they're included. I hope that helps a little bit with where our program has to come from.
Lee, this is Chris. May I speak?
Absolutely.
I had also suggested some language for the purposes of trying to be more clear and in congruence with federal guidelines. And at that time, I had mentioned language that EPAC uses. I think Mead's point about Title VI is very well taken. And I think Natalie's intentions are excellent, and I agree with them. But I think that the kind of clarity Mead mentions might be useful. In the spirit of that, I think one example for Howard might be Native American populations. For example, we could acknowledge the fact that basically we live on land and we work on land that is the ancestral home of many peoples who came before us. I would like to see that sort of thing included. I think, Howard, to some extent, people in the community who are not normally heard would like to be heard. And it's our job to include them and give them that opportunity. I don't think that makes us responsible for giving any group special treatment. I think it's an acknowledgement that when we look at the composition of even this committee, we're not necessarily representative of the diversity of our community at this point. And we're simply saying that we'd like to be open to being more representative and listening to all the different groups that comprise the community. Yeah, I may not be saying this very well, but that's my comment.
So this is Sarah. I hear what you all are saying, and I completely agree that there needs to be greater emphasis. My suggestion from a personal standpoint, not necessarily as chair, but my personal take would be maybe there needs to be a separate resolution that's voted on separately and that includes the federal guidelines. Whereas this list is typically kind of like a general overview of specific areas that are touched by all those federal regs. You know, Title VI doesn't necessarily cover the air section. And so we could get down a rabbit hole trying to include many things in this list. But if we did like an overview statement, like is in the overview section, and then maybe Natalie can work with, you know, others and come up with a separate diversity, equity, and inclusion resolution for the committee so that there's a longer period of time for comment too. And then that way more people could have input and it could be a little bit more focused on that so that EPAC could vote on a way that we could have greater emphasis. And that way, you know, like Mead said, you could have a presentation on how those underserved communities are you know, drawn out, like how we determined where those underserved communities are. Because then, you know, that way it would be, I think, more inclusive. You know, it would be able to be a broader piece rather than just a small paragraph that could get easily, well, not easily, but could be misconstrued on, like Howard's comment is who decides where they are and how are they decided, and it could become a rabbit hole for the environmental issues list where this is a shorter list, I think, typically for the year.
And this is Chris again, and I would just go back to relying in part on federal language that in particular is used by the EPA for some of these definitions. And I think that it's a really good idea, whether we're talking about climate change or whatever we're discussing, clarification of what it is we mean is important. So to that extent, I can see Howard's concern and perception. And if we have language that isn't my opinion or your opinion per se, but that is kind of across the board understood and defined, such as language used in the EPA to define some of these terms, it helps us get above that personal interpretation or misinterpretation, as the case might be. Thank you.
This is Howard Myers. I do not want to have the last say in this. That's not my intention. I want to say thank you for the discussion. But at this point, I'm one member of this committee that believes that this paragraph needs further thought and discussion. So if you're going to include it, I understand you're going to include it, but I do want to express, I don't want to use the word protest, but I would like to express my concern that this paragraph in its present form be left in this list, if you will. I think it warrants further discussion, review, and that's, again, I'm not here to protest or have the final say. So that's it. I'm finished.
And I will just say, following up on those comments, that the reason that I wanted it to be placed as a priority is because I believe that this is a topic that's not a topic that's necessarily something that sits on its own, but is included and considered in every single thing that we do. And so if we include it as a priority, then it's something that we are then saying that we have intention to address it in all the different facets that we address within EPAC. And I think that having that intention and, making a concerted effort to look at this topic in the context within each of the other topics that we look at EPAC, that's important. And I do fear, Sarah, a little bit, but if it was just a resolution, that it might be something that then is not necessarily incorporated in that same way within EPAC. But of course, I am open to any comments, and if anybody had suggestions about rewording this. I did submit it to PAG when before the priorities were finalized and sent out, and it was not included. And so there was the opportunity to include it, to have a look at it earlier, but it wasn't included before it was sent out.
So Lee, do you think we should would we bench this until the next meeting and then reword it so that it's more clear? Because I too feel like it's not very clear how where those communities, who's going to decide what the committees are. I understand that, or the communities are that are impacted. I mean, I understand EPAC is, covers many of the communities, but how would we go forward, Lee? Do you know?
Well, if we do table it, usually we only meet about 4 times a year. So
Yeah.
we could bring it up at the next meeting. That is possible at the pleasure of the committee. But we could also have a subgroup of people to talk about it and rework it. We've done all task forces of a committee to kind of address this particular issue. That's one way to go about it. Or there could be, some language change today. But given that we have other presenters, I think in the interest of time,
Yeah, it's been.
if there isn't consensus amongst everyone to move forward, or at least a majority, if we do call a vote, I don't know. Maybe we could get a sense of how people feel about this language. I know, Howard, you've expressed your opinion. I don't know if there are others who would like to see that, maybe we can get a sense, are people good with this new language? Are people wanting more time? So maybe we could ask one of those and get a sense from the committee. Or maybe people want to just unmute themselves quickly within the next minute or two, because I think we've got presenters waiting.
Yeah. So if anybody else has any more comments, you can use the raised hand feature or unmute yourself before we move to vote. Because this is an action item. Kimberly has her hand raised. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I don't see this paragraph as problematic, because I don't see it excluding anyone. I see it as just inviting participation of people who have not had their voices heard historically. I support what it tries to do, increasing engagement. And like I said, I don't see it as being excluding or unwelcoming of anyone. If anything, it's just like broadening the net of involvement in environmental discussions in the region. That's all.
So seeing no other hands raised, I think we will proceed. So we would need, because it's an action item, we would need a motion to approve the Environmental Planning Advisory Committee's top environmental issues list for 2022 with the amendments as presented by Natalie Shep. So we would need a motion to approve to send these on to the executive director and PAG. So if you have a motion, please unmute yourself.
This is Christina. I would move to approve and with the inclusion of Natalie's paragraph.
Okay, do we have a second?
May
I'll
I
second
speak?
it.
Howard Myers, I disapprove of whatever the proper language is. I want to make sure I'm recorded on behalf of Saba. That's very important. We need to look at it again. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, if you want to say yay, you can unmute yourself.
Yay.
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 And all opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so a majority has voted for yay to move this item on for approval. It will be the motion was to send this environmental list on to the PAG executive director for approval.
Thank you.
So our next item, got too many papers here, is a presentation on solid waste reduction plan from Los Reales Sustainability Campus and Recycling. This presentation will be given by Christina Palsgrove. She is the Public Information Officer for Tucson's Environmental and General Services Department. She is also managing waste division programs, including recycling. Christina is a lifelong Tucsonan and proud Wildcat. Christina, I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? So we've presented to PAG pretty regularly about recycling and what's happening. I want to give just a brief update on that before going to the sustainability campus. So.
And Christina, typically I'll turn my camera on and give you a 5-minute warning, or I'll just say 5 minutes interrupting you. So if I interrupt you, I'm sorry, but
okay.
That way I'll give you some time. You have about 10 to 15 minutes for your presentation and a few minutes for questions.
Okay. I'm not able to advance the slides.
Christina, go ahead and use your mouse to click on the slide.
Okay.
And then now you
And
can
then
use your
it should work.
keyboard, the arrows. There you go.
Good, thank you. So just briefly, we did the Blue Barrel program that really increased our diversion rate. We faced a lot of challenges in 2018 due to the China National Sword. I'm happy to say that our processing costs are going down. You can see we've had a lot of issues, going from, of about $500,000 in revenue. And you can see that, in 2018, we really dropped, and we've been going through that. As of this year in FY22, we are seeing the markets improving considerably. So we have been receiving some revenue instead of having to pay. So I would say in this first few months of FY 2022, we've earned about $40,000. So it's pretty minimal, but it's also better than writing a check. One of the things that's really important to note is we do have a good diversion rate. It's going down. We have seen our tonnages drop. Not really sure about why that is, although people seem to be confused about what they can recycle. And I think, well, we hear from people a lot saying, well, you keep changing the rules. We honestly haven't changed them, but I believe that there's been, so much media attention about recycling nationally that it has, confused people. Plus, we have people coming from all over the country, and every recycling program is going to be different for the most part. But we do have a really strong participation rate. We did a tagging project this past spring, and our participation rate, which means that someone sets out their recycling bin at least once a month, is about 85%, which is very good. What's bad is the contamination rate. We are remaining steady at about 30%, and that costs us about $25,000 to $30,000 a month. So we really wanted to address the contamination. We were very fortunate that we received a grant from the Recycling Partnership with the goal of improving the quality of the recyclables that we collected. So we started in March, mid-March, and we completed the project in June. We did what we did in terms of an overview of the project was we identified 3 routes on each service day. So Monday through Friday, 3 routes. They each were about 1,000 homes. We had teams of 2 out inspecting and tagging. The project took place over 8 weeks because of our every other week schedule. And so they were able to get to all those homes over 8 weeks. In terms of the targeted areas, we really looked at each day and went by input from our drivers, letting us know, what areas are pretty bad. We didn't want to just focus on the bad, so we went and chose routes that were good, average, bad, so we could get a really clear picture of what was going on in the community. We did complete a pre and a post sort to see what to be able to measure our results. And because it was a short-term program, we used temp inspectors through Tucson Clean and Beautiful. And we had 3 staff field supervisors to address any issues out in the field. And then, of course, we provided support in the office. So what we found, the inspectors went out every morning before the trucks, and we asked them not to dig through bins. We certainly didn't want people exposing themselves to any kind of health issues or risks, but they had the choice of 3 tags. The oops with the little girl was actually a tag indicating that the bin could not be serviced as recyclable because it was so contaminated. And that would mean that something in there was dirty diapers, food waste, animal waste, things that are just clearly not recyclable, lumber, all sorts of things. And then the yellow tag was just a warning, just reminding people what could be recycled. And then, as most of you know, we removed glass from the recycle bins in February. And this was still very early on in that process. So we didn't want to penalize people who still put glass in, but we would leave them a tag just reminding them that it was not accepted, and we would still service it. This would mean that everything else in the bin was just fine. So, and then just to mention, we had sent a postcard mailer to every home that we were going to be inspecting, reminding them of what was recyclable. Now, what we saw is the tagging rate dropped considerably. You can see over the 4 passes. The first pass, we tagged 44% of the bins. And by the fourth week, we were down to 18%. We saw the contamination, and this was based on the pre and the post sort, go from 30% to just below 20%. We ended up at about 19.1%, but in that post sort, someone had dumped 20 pounds of batteries, which are not accepted. And that if we removed those, we would have been below 18.5%. This is really key because we are not assessed that excess residue fee to the MRF unless, as long as our contamination rate remains below 18.7. So what we found was that, by doing this quality control and, reminding people, working with them face to face, that we could have some very positive impacts on the recycling process in Tucson. We've always had the ability to enforce. It's in our code that, we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. We've just never really done it in the past because the markets were very strong and we were getting checks and it wasn't, a high priority. As we've had to pay more, it's become more clear that, we need to do something. If people choose not to recycle properly, then, that's okay, but we need to remove them from the program. I think our results show that this part of an education piece is really important. The inspectors had a lot of positive interactions with residents who they didn't, they said they really just didn't know, they weren't sure, and they improved. Of course, we had some people that were just, upset, and we were infringing on their privacy, and, they just weren't going to recycle anymore. And again, it's a personal choice. The recycling program has always been voluntary. So we're looking to implement this permanently and have it be something where we can, regularly send out inspectors to monitor the recycle bins. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the sustainability campus. And then at the end, if you have questions about any of it, we can take those. So as you know, we, Mayor and Council changed the name of the Los Reales landfill to the Los Reales Sustainability Campus. And, we've gotten a lot of questions about it and why are you, what are you doing? As you know, the landfill is a very large property. It's more than 1,200 acres. Probably about a third of that will actually be used for this disposal of waste. And we have a lot of property out there that we can do different things for. This was implemented because a year ago, the mayor and council adopted or voted on a resolution to say that, we are in a climate emergency, that we need to be moving towards zero waste. We have a goal of 50% waste diversion by 2030 and zero waste by 2050. We also wanted to look at the property to see how can we use it today to help us meet these goals rather than wait 100 years into the future to use this asset that we have. Most landfills, when they close, become, trails, parks, open spaces. And we believe we can do some of those things now, as well as use property that we have to support waste diversion and other activities that will help us meet these local goals, these goals set by the mayor and council.
We have about 4 minutes left, Christina.
Okay. Here's the existing landfill. This is an aerial. We have, these are the waste diversion areas. We've got all of this property all the way over here and all the way back down. So you can see we have a lot. This is where we are doing the composting that was started back in April, working with the compost cats. And this is where we'll be crushing glass that we are collecting in drop-off sites around the community. We plan to use property out here for some other uses. But what we really did is, we wanted to start this process of changing people's perception of waste as a liability, something that you need to get rid of, and to look at it as a resource. This is something that we've seen many communities are doing as we all work toward minimizing our waste. And I think that, we all know that the zero waste term was pretty confusing because most people accept it. I don't know that it's the best term because it's, in the industry, zero waste is generally accepted to be 85 to 90% waste diversion. So you're never going to get to zero, but you can do things to really minimize what you are landfilling. So the strategies that we're using is, we want to maximize our opportunities to implement sustainability practices. We want this to be the first net zero facility. We've always been in a position where we had to capture stormwater and to meet our permitting requirements. We have set up an area that will be used for the crushing of glass that can be used locally in construction projects. We started the composting. We're collecting waste, food waste scraps from different partners, customers in, grocery stores, restaurants, that sort of thing, and composting the material. We're getting pretty close to having the first good batch of it. And we are looking to implement solar energy as well as, wind. The other big thing that we are working on currently is, we have in the past collected the methane and piped it over to TEP. TEP no longer needs that for the production of energy. And so we're looking at how we can do that. How are we going to use the landfill gas that's generated there, either to inject it into the natural gas pipeline system or be able to use it on site to provide energy for the facility and also energy for our fleet of trucks, which are all powered by compressed natural gas. Sorry. The other thing we want to do is we are currently working with Tucson Clean and Beautiful. We want to establish a tree nursery that will support the 1 million trees goal. We're looking at opening up a last chance store where people could drop things off that perhaps have a reuse, and people could take advantage of that, take the material and use it for their own purposes or business or whatever they might do. But we really want to see usable products being reused and not just landfilled. We already collect e-waste and scrap metal there. And the other thing is, when the landfill was built, it was pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. And what we've seen is there are many, many more home communities being developed around us. And we want to be a good neighbor. We want to preserve the open space that's there. We do have a wash that runs through, and we have a lot of wildlife. But we want to start looking at those recreational opportunities now, and as opposed to the landfill will close in 60 to 70 years, and then it has to be monitored for another 30. We want to start looking at those opportunities now.
Christina, you're at 16 minutes, so we should probably wrap it up pretty quick.
Okay. And this is just the general plan. We're, working on how we can use the property. And one of the things is setting up some areas where entrepreneurs who are using reused materials to build products, perhaps we can provide an opportunity for them to work out there, to set up their shop and not have to deal with overhead costs. So that's another important project that we're working on. That's it. I'll take questions.
Christina, this is Christina.
Hi.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
I just wondered if you are familiar with some of the work that's gone on in Phoenix. I did a field trip up there when we were looking at the A Mountain landfill, and they have converted landfills into parks and things of that nature previously. And are you exploring some of the successes they've had up there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're aware we have about, including Los Reales, we have 23 old landfills within the city limits. One is Tumamoc, which, as you know, is really heavily used for hiking and walking groups.
Well, right now it's covered in buffalo grass, so that's kind of a concern.
Yeah. And we don't own it, but we do provide the environmental monitoring because of the old landfill. We've done work out there too. We had a few issues a few years ago where trash was coming up to the surface, and so we needed to recover and make sure that the erosion control was in place. But yes, Phoenix has done a great job. We work with them regularly as part of our professional organization, and they have been working with ASU to develop their zero waste plan. We are also working with ASU and another consultant to develop the zero waste plan. And I think one of the things, we've heard very clearly from mayor and council is that as we develop this plan, we need to do some extensive outreach to make sure that we are meeting the needs of people in the community and implementing a plan that the wider community can buy into, which will mean, reaching out to those underserved communities. It's really important that we work with everyone, and that will be something that you all will see us do.
Who will be treating the buffalo grass at like Tumamoc?
Well, I don't know that. I want to say that I believe it's owned by the university. I know that there's a lot of efforts in the community to address buffalo grass. I honestly can't tell you because that has not been something I've been involved in.
So we are relatively short on time. Kimberly Baeza, could you maybe email Christina your question?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, because we're running out of time. We have two more presentations.
No, that's okay.
All right, so we'll move on. Thank you so much, Christina, for that presentation.
You're welcome.
Our next presentation is the Santa Cruz River Management Plan, Grant Road to Canal County. And we have for this presentation, Evan Canfield. He is the Watershed Studies Division Manager at the Pima County Regional Flood Control District. And he leads the Santa Cruz River Management Plan effort for the district. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to try to run through this pretty quickly. I should say that we contracted with CMG Drainage, Kimley Horn, J.E. Fuller, and Sonoran Institute on the different aspects of this. So they're kind of all involved. Let's see, please. Do I need to touch the yellow to get it to listen to me? There it goes.
And I'll give you a 5-minute warning after 15 minutes, Evan.
Yeah, I thought I'd gotten rid of all these animations, but the purpose of this is to balance flood risk management, drainage infrastructure protection, water recharge, recreation opportunities, public safety, and riparian habitat preservation for the Santa Cruz River from Grant Road to Pinal County. There's a website. I should say that initially the thought on the management for this came out of the Living River effort that we did with Sonoran Institute. At that point, we identified that there are 3 reaches of the Santa Cruz with very distinct differences. So as we went through this, we had stakeholder groups that were reach specific. I'm going to tell you first about the phase 1 results, which are basically we had to understand everything about the reach before we began stakeholder input, but then went through an alternative selection process, the development of concept plans, and an implementation plan. Okay, so the existing conditions report essentially documented everything that we knew about this reach in terms of land ownership, management, previous plans, expectations for development adjacent to the Santa Cruz in this reach. The infrastructure assessment went through and looked at all the drainage infrastructure up and down the river, so all the bank protection, the levees, the bridges, culverts, everything that we knew and all we knew about repeat problem areas. And one aspect of that was then, I think I skipped through one of these slides, but we did a floodplain mapping, and this is kind of cool. I'm going to show this video just because it's cool. So this is the 100-year flood coming north of Aver Valley Road and spreading out into Marana. So we use this 2-dimensional floodplain mapping to prepare what we call a technical data support notebook. So this is the flood control district, and we have to know where the floodplains are. So a big part of that was, that's a starting effort for everything. There's many models up and down the Santa Cruz that have been adopted by FEMA in different sections. So we wanted one consistent description of the floodplain through here. So all these are phase 1 products. And then we get into really the stakeholder driven process, where we begin to identify projects. So we started with a visioning exercise with the stakeholders. So I'm going to see maybe if I can go back. Let's go back, even though I know I'm going to kill my time here. But we had a collaborative of different stakeholder interests together and describe their vision for what the Santa Cruz ought to be. So in this case, we've got public safety, recreation, and efficient and responsible development, and then removal of invasive species. So in some of these, we've already started. Then we went through and identified the kinds of projects we would do. Of course, we're the flood control district, so we're going to do flood control projects. Water resources is extremely important here. Significant amount of all the water that Tucson residential water providers produce ends up back in the Santa Cruz River. Of course, there's recreation with the loops in the park, community compatibility, some version of what the Santa Cruz ought to be will have a different vision for the people in Marana than it will be for the people in what we call the Three Rivers next, where the Rito, the Santa Cruz, and the CDO come together. And of course, there's public safety. So from that, we identified a series of potential alternatives, 16 potential structural alternatives. This is a new recreational node proposed across from where the CDO enters the Santa Cruz. So there's some habitat restoration. There is a proposed pedestrian path from the loop on the east to the west, and then a recreational node on the proposed loop on the west side of Santa Cruz. So that ends up in here. So all the selection, the weighting was driven by stakeholder processes. So they would rank which of these 6 kinds of project was most important. And then we also looked at weighting criteria. So each of the projects, we'd look at not only is it a flood control project, but does it do floodplain management? And we had specific descriptions of what those would mean. So as I said, the 3 different reaches of the Santa Cruz view the Santa Cruz priorities a little differently. As project type, all 3 of the groups recognize that flood control is extremely important. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see that the overall, the greatest priority envisioned by the stakeholders was flood control. Interestingly, in the middle reach, the most bank protected reach from Ina to Avar Valley, the highest priority was actually in environment. And that's kind of an interesting observation in that, you know, the place where we have the best flood control and probably the least opportunity for more habitat restoration is the place where they want habitat restoration. And likewise, in the other 2 reaches where there's the least bank protection, priority tends to be flood protection. And when we look at the alternatives weighting, so there's project type and there's a weighting of the different projects. Once again, floodplain management was the highest priority, but very different views between the stakeholders in some areas. So for example, in Avar to Pinal County, the question of economic viability is extremely high. While Grant to Ina, the stakeholders didn't view economic viability or the importance of economic vitality, excuse me, as all that important. So, from that, we started out with 110. We used pretty simple weighting in that does this project do this thing? So if it reduces flood risk, none, low or high, reduce erosion risk, none, no, high. And so that's how each of the projects were weighted. And we ended up with 16 structural, and I'm not going to go into them in specificity. Luke is going to talk about the trash side of the non-structural. But in this way, we had 110 potential projects, and through a series of 3 stakeholder meetings, we had 16 proposed projects. We had public meetings. We had combined stakeholder meetings. So now we're at the implementation plan. We identified the 16 different projects, identified how long they would take, and came up with cost estimates. and then laid these out how we would like to see them in time, and what we called near term, midterm, long term. In general, near term means the next 5 years. So some of the things that we're looking at in the next 5 years are improved stability of the channel between Ina and Aver Valley with some habitat improvements, some improvement, that recreational node I mentioned, a wildlife connectivity. We have some places we need to add levee freeboard because we don't have levee freeboard. Then we identified the kind of implementation we can do. Some things we can use a job order contractor, which is a very simple way to just get things done. Some things we'll need to have design bid build, where we get an engineering design, get a bid and build. So those are much longer administrative processes than the JOC. And so all those are described in the implementation plan, which my co-presenter here, Scott Altair, tells me we should have finalized next week. But
You're
so
at
with
11 minutes. Sorry, Evan, you're at
How many?
11 minutes.
I got to get rid of that. Our cost estimates were to the 15% design level, which means we can begin putting them in the administrative path to get them built. And there's the implementation schedule I described, near term, midterm, long term. And finally, we have a summary report which describes everything we've done, and we presented this to our Flood Control District Advisory Committee. So we, like many of the jurisdiction, have an advisory committee, and that's represented by members of the City of Tucson, Marana, and the supervisor district, all the other jurisdictions. And in mid-December, we're going to go to them and ask them to endorse the full plan. I should say the plan began in 2018, so it's been a very long process. But that we presented to them, and we're going to them for endorsement in mid-December. Then asked the Pima County Board of Supervisors to endorse it, Town of Marana, and the City of Tucson. So, and then in the spring, we are going to go to the Floodplain Management Plan Committee, which is the organization, sort of the stakeholder organization that we've developed to oversee floodplain management in Pima County. So plan is to present to them in the spring. Christina and others here are on that. So with that, I'm done, probably fast.
Great
Questions?
job. Kimberly has a question. Kimberly Baeza.
Hey, Kimberly.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand down. It's from last, yeah, I don't.
Hey,
That's kind of funny. I didn't see it before. Any other questions or comments? That was a great presentation, Evan. Thank you.
I'm
We're
moving
going to move on to presentation on stewardship of streams and the Sonoran Institute updates. There are two presenters for this. Luke Cole directs the Sonoran Institute Santa Cruz River program. He oversees the production of the Living River reports, creates and maintains partnerships, and is now coordinating the Santa Cruz River trash study, which he'll present on today. And his co-presenter is Jamie Irby. Jamie is an environmental science major at U of A's College of Agriculture and Life Science and was placed at Sonoran Institute through U of A's new Earth Grant program. During this academic year, Jamie will be leading the Santa Cruz River Trash Study, which involves fieldwork, database building, and working with partners like EPAC. So I will turn it over to you both. And if you see my video pop up where I give you an interruption warning at about 10 minutes in your presentation, I'll give you a 5-minute warning.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, and I'm going to touch the screen gently. See if I have control. I think it might take a second. Well, while that's coming together, I wanted to thank EPAC for the invitation to present on this project. Realizing just the other day that in October of last year, I had provided you all with a preliminary concept presentation of what this study will be about. So we can call this Evaluating Trash in the Santa Cruz River 1 year later. So we're familiar with the Santa Cruz. This is a beautiful picture of a broad floodplain down in Carmen. The Santa Cruz River, throughout its flow extent in the US, is all effluent, all of this high quality effluent. We have our 2 treatment plants up here in Pima County, and there's a large international wastewater treatment plant down in Rio Rico that causes the flows in this stretch of the river that we're seeing here. And this is a longstanding program of Sonoran Institutes. We've been doing work for over 30 years in the Santa Cruz. And our mission that all of our programming falls into around the Santa Cruz is to support a living, flowing river, and for the river itself to be the foundation of community health and prosperity. So here is just a quick schematic of the Santa Cruz. Earlier, I was referring to this stretch of the river. So Carmen is kind of right around where my cursor is here. The river starts in the US, flows into Mexico. There's some perennial and natural flows right through this bend and at the headwaters. Then it kind of dries out. We have these 16 or so miles of flow coming out of the Nogales International Wastewater Treatment Plant that takes wastewater from Nogales, Sonora and Nogales, Arizona. We have a long dry stretch here in the middle of the Santa Cruz. We now have 2 stretches of the Heritage Project. We have the TARP flows that are down here, and we have the stretch that's just south of downtown. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the 2 treatment plants, Agua Nueva and Tres Rios. But as every visitor to the river knows, trash is just a constant presence in the river. The pictures that are accompanying the picture from Carmen that I showed a little while ago are taken just north of Tumacacri National Historical Park last week. There is a trash barge there of bottles and floatables that have caused the Santa Cruz River to jump its banks. And it's now flowing for a stretch in its historical bank rather than its current bank because there's just such a massive amount of trash in there. Fortunately, we don't have that problem up here in Pima County, but as Evan described during the River Management Plan stakeholder and public presentations that we gave in 2019 and 2020, while talking about conditions in the river and what needs to be improved, folks continuously talked about trash. How can we address trash? Which is why it's 2 of the 20 proposed alternative projects in the River Management Plan. And I'll be talking about both of them shortly. And it's a problem up here in particular because we have a very flashy precipitation system here. And we don't have a lot of the traditional below ground stormwater transportation systems that a lot of other places have. We have a lot of above ground, the inverted channel streets where the water can move over the streets, which allows it to entrain trash and other debris, creating kind of a highway network of trash to make its way into the river. And as we know, when the monsoons come, they come on very fast. They make things mobilize very quickly. And it results in some significant inputs of trash. So, following the conversations that we had during the River Management Plan meetings, we of course started thinking, what can be done about this? Because there's basin-wide interest in a solution. I've given it examples from down in Santa Cruz County, and it's definitely of interest up here in Pima County. We have nonprofits that are working on this, right? We have Tucson Clean and Beautiful. They contract with the city of Tucson and with Pima County. We have Sonoran Institute, who I'm representing today. We also are aware of this trash problem and have ongoing research and outreach around it. And we have a lot of municipal representation. I should be adding Tucson Water in the city of Tucson to this list. But there are departments and districts within Pima County, PAG, and this group here in particular. You all are interested in addressing, or at least understanding more, what the trash situation is in the Santa Cruz River, and we want to help out with that. And also, we have neighborhood associations and guerrilla groups that get out there, and they do a lot of the small-scale trash cleanup in some of the washes. And fortunately, since this presentation, a lot of these groups that I was referring to as guerrilla groups, who sort of went out there quickly, pulled the trash out and got out, have now started engaging with Pima County Flood Control District to get permitted to get access into the river to do their trash cleanup. So they may still, and understandably, and should feel very proud about their quick moving action and their ability to assemble. But fortunately now they're being increasingly recognized by the county and are doing so safely and with some county oversight. And partly what can be done outside of individual cleanup efforts or coordinated volunteer cleanup efforts are some of these engineering solutions. So I'm showing two examples of trash capture devices that are installed in different urban stream systems. These are designed to use the flow of the water to passively collect water while allowing water to move through and without them disturbing wildlife. They're also designed to be very quickly and easily emptied and replaced so that they can stay in production and in capture mode all of the time. These are used now internationally. There seems to be some interest here in Arizona, particularly in southern Arizona, around what this trash technology could do for our river systems. And partly what Jamie and I are going to be talking about is the effort to gather and collect data that can best inform either strategic engineering solutions to capture that trash, or even strategic trash cleanup events to go to where we see the trash most often. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. Jamie, if you can unmute, or if you all can unmute Jamie, you're good to go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie, and I'm the intern who's working with Luke on this project. And I'm going to be walking you guys through the protocol that we are using to kind of collect all this data to help back up the engineering that we're going to be using for this. So
sorry, I did that. Sorry.
That's okay. So yeah, this protocol it's really easy. It's something that I do about twice a week. I go out to the Santa Cruz River to different sites, and I kind of just set up a transect. And of course, I'll walk you through this in a bit, but I set up a transect and just kind of start collecting data on what trash and how much trash I see in certain parts of the river. So yeah, this was based on a method that was already existing from the Anacostia Watershed Society in Washington, DC, but it was kind of like modified, more Arizona-fied to some of the trash that we see more often in the Santa Cruz. It's applicable in any place. It's super, super easy. My first training that I did with Luke on this literally took only 30 minutes, and I've gotten my time down to 15 minutes now, so hopefully I can make a new best by the time this is done. So yeah, it's really simple, and if we go to the next slide, we'll start getting into the actual data sheet that I use. So this is the first page of the data sheet. It's all just entirely about the location of the transect in the river, like a place in the river, and then exactly where in the river. So the most important thing is the GPS coordinates. I usually just use my iPhone, the compass app, just to get a precise location of the exact transect, the square. And I also take a picture just in case I somehow forget, my phone will collect that data for me. And then the date and my name, of course, and the location, I usually just put either a significant bridge or park or just the streets that I'm near when I'm in the river. And the type of station, like I mentioned before, you can use this for riverbeds, riverbanks, and washes. And in terms of the type of flow, about 90% of the time that I've gone out there, it's been dry. There have been a couple times, and I went to one site with Luke where the water was running and it was beautiful and it was gorgeous. But luckily, if it's dry, it means it's a lot easier for me to collect data on the trash. So the transect diameters, usually I just do a 10 by 10 meter square. Sometimes I can adjust it to like a 20 by 5 or a 10 by 1, just depending on the distribution of trash that I find in the river. But usually it's just a standard 10 by 10. And then for the transect identifying features, it's just, I usually use horse ramps to get into the river because I'm not that good at scaling walls right now. So I usually just say where the transect is in relation to the horse ramp. And luckily there's a lot that go into the Santa Cruz River. And then finally, vegetation is really important because it can tell us the trash that's really mobile usually gets caught on the vegetation or on rocks. And we use just a quick and really easy score. The highest that I've ever scored was a 5, and that was just once, but it's usually just a 2 to 3, sometimes a 4. So that's the first page, really easy to fill out. And then the next 2 pages is where I actually start counting trash. So once I set up the transect with my flags and tape measure, I just kind of make a snake-like motion and go throughout the transect and just count every single piece of trash that I find and put it into these categories. I usually have gloves on just in case I want to like pick up something and be like, what is this? So as you can see, there's a lot of different categories and a lot of subcategories. This covers about like 95% of the trash that I find. Every once in a while I find like an umbrella and I'm like, where should I put this? But usually this is very, very detailed enough for me to be able to find out which category to put it in. Sometimes I do come across really big debris, like I find a lot of mattresses or couches and things like that. And in those cases, I usually just take a picture and then email Pima County and be like, there's very large furniture in the middle of the river, if you'd be so kind as to come get it, because I do try and work out, but I'm not that strong enough to carry it out myself. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Like I said, I do this about twice a week. So if you're ever biking around the Santa Cruz River and you see a girl in the river, that's probably me counting trash.
Ring your bell.
Yeah. Feel free to say hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. This is what my main focus is right now for the project, is just going through the length of the river that's in Pima County. And I'm going from north to south at the moment and just trying to get a really good general fill of the database done.
Thanks, Jamie. We just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to quickly crash through some of our preliminary data that Jamie has collected. So just to show you that our efforts in fall 2021, Jamie's going to be with us through this academic year. So since Jamie has started, we've pretty much equaled all of our previous number of plots that we did out in the field, which is the best. You can see here the total on the y-axis here. This is the total abundance, the total number of items per season. On the figure on the left, on the figure on the right, that's the weight of those associated counts. And of course, more often than not, the more trash you see, the more it's going to weigh, or the more weight you're going to get. Here we're doing, this is by area, right? Remember Jamie said she typically does a 10 meter by 10 meter grid. So if you take those data and you put them per square meter, this is where patterns start to get a little bit interesting. So you can see here in winter 2020, that's when we saw the highest density of trash in the river. But when you look at that weight density, the ounces per meter squared, that's the figure on the right, it's a little bit different. And as Jamie was just saying, it's not uncommon to come across really large appliances, really large pieces of trash in the river. So that constitutes a lower total trash density, but a higher weight of trash per meter squared, at least in this fall season. And we have a lot of categories, as Jamie was just showing. The most abundant category is food packaging. We find, it's very clear that sort of cellophane or metal crinkly wrapper, we see those in the river absolutely everywhere. But there are also high abundances of plastic bags, clothing, and miscellaneous debris. But when you're looking at the general types of categories, everything from plastic bags to food packaging, we call that those are all in sort of the food related world. And that does constitute the highest abundance of trash so far. And then by weight, trash packaging, food packaging doesn't weigh a whole lot. So it doesn't constitute a really large portion of the total weight. Where we see the highest weights are in clothing, automobile parts, appliances, etc. So upcoming analyses will be looking at things that float versus don't float, things that are recyclable versus non-recyclable. And because we take a GPS point for every one of the survey plots that Jamie runs, we're going to start doing a GIS analysis to look at where and in what particular reaches of the river we see the greatest amount of trash. We want to thank the Earth Grant Program and Pima County Regional Flood Control District for funding for this research. And with that, we'll take any comments and questions. Sorry for going a little bit over. And thanks for sticking with us past 11 o'clock, folks who were able to stay around.
Kimberly Baiza has her hand up.
Is it the same hand from before, Kimberly?
No, it's
think
not.
so.
It's a new hand.
What's that?
I was wondering, so you have these engineering solutions and also people going out into the riverbed and collecting trash. Is there anything being done upstream of that, like outreach education? I'm thinking of what Christine was talking about, how effective it was to educate the people recycling about what should go in there and how it had a positive result. Is there anything like that going on?
It's in the works. I mean, Tucson Clean and Beautiful does a good amount about that. We're also planning on including a trash section in our upcoming Living River reports. The reports that will likely come out for Pima County in fall of 2022 will dive into that a little bit. And I think we'll be building in some outreach around that throughout the spring and summer and following on after that. Because I don't see this as a one-year project. I think we're probably going to need some more focused study or maybe even studies with more statistical significance following on the work that Jamie is doing. But right now we're trying to assess what trash is there. Need.
Just following up on that, I think we could partner up a little better between our Clean Water Starts With Me campaign and what you're doing, because we create a regional template for outreach for our stormwater partners, and that includes litter, among other stormwater pollutants.
Great.
We haven't had funding in many years, so we mostly just provided like a messaging template and visual graphics, but we could always look, for partners to fund together.
We're there for you need on that. That sounds great.
Awesome, thank you.
And Christina and Howard have their hands up, and then after that, we'll have to move along. So Christina McVie.
I just wanted to say thank you to Evan and Jamie and Luke for excellent work and presentation. It's very exciting, and carry on.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that.
And Howard?
Yes, I'm all over the industry with regards to construction debris.
Hey.
And I noticed you have a category noted as construction. Can you be a little more specific on what debris constitutes your category for construction, please?
Sure. I think we may have that in the, did I lose control? Yeah, I did. That's typically lumber, scrap metal, some like sort of block styrofoam. But more often than not, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's typically lumber that we see as the most common construction item in the river.
Yeah, I also see a lot of like rope or like metal pipes. Basically, if I can see someone using it in construction, or if I've seen it being used in construction before, then that's generally what I put it in with.
Howard, is there a better catch-all term that you think we should be using rather than construction?
No, not necessarily, but I would like to mention that I would support SABA members, somebody provide a little input at one of the SABA meetings that meet every month, because again, this construction debris stuff really, really bothers me. And I think, I'm in support of what you guys are doing. And if you like, I'll ask SABA to invite one of you to. But for that, they're going to want to say, is this just wildcat dumping, guys backing their trucks up and throwing it over the side of a cliff, or is this blown in? Because I'm on them on this kind of stuff. So something to consider.
Yeah, the source tracking is something we've talked about with Pima County Flood Control as well. And it's difficult. Trying to understand where the trash is coming from. It's one thing to see sort of a labeled styrofoam cup and you know what store it came from. It's a different thing when there's scrap lumber or, a bucket of caulking or something like that that's in the river. Who knows how long that's been in there or what other uses it's had since it's been used in construction. But for categories and trying to understand what sort of trash is in the river, the phase we're in now is to inform around possible engineering solutions or around where there can be more dumpsters or trash barrels or something like that put in the river. I think in time we're going to be able to start employing some more interesting source tracking to get a feel, exactly where the trash may be coming from. That's down the line. That's probably phase 3. We're early in phase 1. But I appreciate that, Howard, and happy to talk about that anytime.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much for the presentation. And there are other construction, I know groups like Arizona Transportation Builders, and if you guys are looking for volunteers, I know a lot of those groups will offer services for volunteering, for going out and helping with cleanups or donating dumpsters or, things like that. So it's really important that you guys have these presentations so people know, like, hey, there's construction debris. Let's take a look and see if we can figure out where it's coming from. And so thank you so much. And our next meeting will be in the spring, but it'll be TBD. We don't know what date we're going to have it yet. And Natalie will be your chair for the next meeting. So thank you all so much for letting me serve. And I've enjoyed my time being chair and vice chair. And hopefully I'll still be attending the meetings as a PDQ's representative. Thanks so much. And we'll go ahead and adjourn. It's 11:11.